morning with Jonathan Walter and Greg Garcia at Anglers All. First, I want to thank you guys for your time this morning. And just, Jonathan, if you wouldn't mind, just a little bit of information about yourself and what brought you to being here with us today.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan Walter. I'm a Fly Fishers International certified master casting instructor. But most importantly, I'm a fly fisher. I like fly fishing. I enjoy all forms of fly fishing. I started in about 1990. I always wanted to try it. I had fished bait and spin all my life. And when I moved here to Colorado in around '88, within 18 months or so, I took a class in fly fishing. I did a couple guided trips, and I was literally and figuratively hooked on it. I did a lot of nymphing, a lot of indicator nymphing, because that was becoming popular at the time. And it got kind of tedious for me. I got pretty good at it, but it got kind of tedious for me. Sure did catch a lot of fish. That's great, but really enjoyed dry fly. And then through the process of reading some old books, learned about swinging wet flies and started to just do more and more of that with a single hand rod and really enjoyed it. And I will take one tug from a fish the entire day over nymphing and catching fish all day. That's how much I love swinging wet flies. So that led in turn to two-hand casting, because I learned that's all about swinging flies. And I knew a bunch of people in Fly Fishers International who were two-hand certified, and I'm sort of on that journey now myself. And that's when I started two-hand casting about 6-8 years ago, and just really enjoy it. And it's the same thing. I'll swing flies all day, and if I get one tug, I'm happy. I'm happy. If it's a fish and I actually catch it and land it, I'm ecstatic, but I'm happy. So that's been kind of my journey. And I love teaching. I love teaching fly fishing. I love teaching fly casting. I love teaching two-hand. It's great fun.
Was there one event that just sparked the interest for you for the two-handed, or do you think taking from the single-handed nymph game to the two-handed spay, do you think that's just the natural evolution that is the Jonathan Walter journey through fly fishing?
For me, I can't remember a single episode except for the first time I had a really good day swinging wet flies. It was on the Arkansas River. I had a great day swinging wet flies. I was catching fish during the caddis hatch when everybody else was casting dry flies and not catching. And I thought, God, there's really something to this. And I was using a single hand rod. And then through the process again of reading books and reading old books, discovered this thing called two-hand casting, and I had seen two-hand casting, and I thought, gosh, I really want to try that and expand my horizons. And oh, by the way, it's all about swinging flies, which I now dearly love. So I think it was kind of a progression for me. But there was that one day. If there was one day that really convinced me, that was it.
Very cool. Very cool. Greg, Mr. Garcia, yourself, it's kind of the evolution of your journey through fly fishing. What sparks it for you, and what led you to being so interested in swinging in the spay game, steelhead, targeting these species that are known to be extraordinarily difficult on a two-handed rod? What brought you to wanting to do that?
Well, so I've been fly fishing and tying flies since, I started off when I was about 10 or 12 on a vacation up here to Colorado. I'm originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and lived in a desert. But one summer we were fortunate enough to come to Colorado and go on a fishing trip with a local guy, which I later found out to be Chuck Fothingill, who's kind of the dean of Colorado fly fishing. I believe he started the first Trout Unlimited chapter in Colorado back in 60s, somewhere back there. The time frame's a little, I'm not really familiar with, but living where I did, it was being a little kid, it was really tough to get to go fish. Finally, after I moved up here in about '82, and after pursuing some other things, I decided I want to start fly fishing. I want to get back into it. There's been some different people throughout my fishing career that have kind of definitely given me lots of help tying, fishing. The first time I ever fished soft hackles was I met a gentleman up on the Pan who had a shop. His name was Roy Palm. He had a fly called the Palm Emerger. And after a tough day on the river, he said, try one of these flies. I guarantee you, you will catch fish with it. I didn't get to try it that day because I was on my way home, but a week later I find myself on the Dream Stream fishing the South Platte. Wind was blowing about 40 miles an hour. Everyone with their normal strike indicators were off the water by 11 o'clock. I always take the attitude, well, I'm here to fish. I only get one day a week, so I'm going to fish regardless of the conditions. So I tied on this, took off all my indicator rig, tied on this little Palm Emerger, just like Roy told me, and started fishing it as he described, down and across, put a mend in as your line starts to bow, even if you have to mend 2 or 3, 4 times throughout that swing. And that day I probably caught 40 fish, and I kept looking around to see if somebody else was seeing how successful I was. Being really new to the sport, I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
Over the years, I kind of got away from that, and but it has always been in the back of my mind. I always wanted to try steelheading. I would sit at night, laying in bed, reading stories about guys up in BC, the Northwest, even down South Chile, swinging flies in the most horrid conditions, freezing rain, wind, and I thought to myself, this sounds like something I would really enjoy. I don't know if it's my background in cycling that, the tougher the conditions, the better you kind of rise to the occasion. Maybe it was the suffering involved that I was missing. So anyway, years later, a good friend of mine, Greg Pearson, who is a phenomenal two-hander, said, I'm going on a trip to Idaho. Why don't you come with me and I'll teach you how to do this game. And we did. I never had a two-hander in my hand before. Within 45 minutes, I was fortunate enough to catch a nice wild hen, and I was, at that point, I was in it. And, it's something special when you can, to me, when you can catch a fish that has had such a long journey, from living in the river as a little squirt and going downstream, in this case over 600 miles through 6 different dams, having every kind of wild animal, trying to catch them, to humans, to going out to the sea for a year, 2 years, coming back, avoiding seals, avoiding nets, going back through 6 dams, and then you connect swinging a fly through a run and feeling that power of that fish. That's something that's special, and I don't think it's random. It's kind of takes it to the next level. So after that trip, I came back and I was really depressed looking at our rivers here in Colorado. It happened to be in the winter time, early November, December. And I remember driving, I went on 4 trips on my days off. And I'd drive up to the river and I'd look at it and I'd go, I can't do it. I just can't get out of the car. Finally, on the 4th trip, I went and I tied on some little dry flies. I finally caught a fish and I was kind of back into it. Soon after that, micro spay rods started becoming popular, or people we started hearing about it. My friend Greg said, yeah, Winston's got this cool new micro spay coming out, you might think about it. So at that point, I bought one and I kind of dedicated my trout fishing here to fishing with the 2-handed rod. Didn't know anything about it. I would ask everybody that walked in, the real steelheaders would come into the store here. They'd just be coming back from BC, and I'd like, can I catch trout doing this? And they're like, I don't know, maybe, So I just kind of kept trying, asked a lot of questions, came up with some formulas of how I would do it, and finally started being successful. And I remember the first time I caught a fish on a trout spay rod was on the South Platte, just not too far from here. And I'd say pretty much now 95% of all my fishing is with a 2-handed rod for trout, and I'm just doing it for a whole year until I can do my one steelhead trip a year. And that's how I can keep off the couch talking to somebody about my problems.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
So it
that's
all
right.
started with one fish that ran the gauntlet in Idaho. So, like you were describing, that fish is special, running past the wild animals, moving through the dams. You wanted to become that wild animal that caught that fish for the first time. Is it safe to call you Greg the Wild Animal Garcia?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've been on trips with him. Absolutely.
So the two of you guys just had the opportunity to fish together out in Oregon on the famed Deschutes River for the steelhead. With the experience that you've had, the experiences that you've built up to leading to that event over the years, what's your mindset, and when do you really start thinking about this trip that takes you away from our well-known Colorado rivers that we all fish, we all love, and you start thinking about big water, big Deschutes, 2-handed rods? What kind of mindset and what kind of tactics do you think about and practice going into that new water, new experience of the trip?
Well, for me, I start thinking about that big water the day I get off the boat from that current trip. I really am thinking about, I have a whole year to wait, and it kills me. Prepping, it doesn't hurt to take the road that I have and play with a 2-handed rod here
Absolutely.
on our trout rivers.
Absolutely.
It helps you read water, what type of water trout like, and also steelhead. Steelhead are usually moving through water to get to their spawning grounds. There's I'd say two types of water that they like. They have a moving run. That's a section of the river that has some pull that those fish are actually moving through. They're not really sitting in that water and resting, but they'll come up through some riffles, some fast, deeper water, and then they'll come into that resting water. And that's great swing opportunity
Great
as
swing
well.
water.
You look for water that has lots of structure in it, lots of little nuggets, as the steelhead guys will say, meaning you're going to have the floor of the river, and there's like lots of boulders, lots of big rocks where those fish can come in there and set and rest and get out of the main current. So definitely the trout spay game definitely gets me ready for that trip. With that saying, we have a lot of people who have gone on this trip with me in the past who have never steelhead fished before or ever had a two-handed rod in their hand. And they were catching fish with just getting the head of the line out, which is about, in some cases, maybe 22 feet or 26 feet, and being very successful in catching some fish. I would also say taking a lesson from Jonathan on two-handed casting, so they're familiar with some different casts. Wind condition, upriver, down or upriver, knowing where to place that anchor so that when they make their cast, the wind doesn't blow the fly into them.
Yes.
And impaling an ear
Don't
or
want to do
something.
that.
So I think some casting lessons help a lot. Other than that, looking at our travel list, what product they're going to need, from sleeping bags to things around camp that are just going to help make that trip so much more comfortable. That type of prep is, I think, real important.
Good.
Yeah.
Same thing, Jonathan. At what point before the trip do you start getting in the mindset of the steelhead? Start looking at water differently on the trout rivers around here, thinking, if this were out in Oregon, that's where that fish would be. How do I target that area?
Yeah. Well, similar to what Greg said, I think the only thing that I would add is when we get off the river at the mouth of the Deschutes, I'm looking forward to a hot shower. But then I also wish I could go back and start all over again the very next day. So I miss it and I think about it too. I really, really start to think about it hard along about September. It's sort of like I start getting these, there must be some sort of hormonal thing that happens. I start getting the yen for swinging for steelhead. But some of that is modified or mitigated by swinging for trout here. And I really do enjoy that. Preparing for the trip, since I'm the casting geek, I'll take up the casting part first. If you've never had a spay rod in your hand, do yourself the service of getting a rod, or if you don't have a rod, I have rods. We can get together, we can do some lessons. I tell most people if they have adequate time before they leave for their trip, I'd like to do 2 90-minute sessions. You need to be able to cast from both sides of the river, and you need to be able to put the anchor or the D-loop, i.e. the line, downwind of you for safety's sake. Safety's the number one, wind direction is the number one criteria for choosing which cast you're going to use. So you need 2 casts for the right side of the river, you need 2 casts for the left side of the river, depending on wind direction. I can get you into basic spay casting that way, and get most people into being able to shoot line beyond 22, 26 foot head, even if they need to do that. Although, and this happened on this trip, there was a time on this past trip that we did where the guide, Brian, said to me, you pull some line in. Because all I needed out was the head for that particular run.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like most casters, you know, you want to go for the opposite bank, right? And so the value of having the guide is to say, don't waste your time over there, you need to concentrate right here. That was actually where I caught a fish. So that was very cool. So I learned something that day about looking at the water and talking to him about why concentrate here versus casting way out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that I learned quite a bit on this past trip. So back to the casting thing, that's really about it, the 3 hours that I talked about. And then I usually talk with anglers about some other things like preparing for the trip. The couple that was on the trip, we talked about, take an extra rain jacket, take a camp towel, make sure you have enough warm clothes. Yes, people do take a swim sometimes. Greg knows about that. And so forth. So taking those and having them available in the boat. You don't want them when you're halfway down the river to your next camp. You don't want your dry clothes in the next camp. You want them with you, and so forth. So usually take a little time talking about that because getting cold and wet is just miserable.
Both of you, neither one of you are rookies to the Deschutes at this point. Years past and this past experience, how did this experience hold up to past events, past expectations? Just talk to me a little bit about the day-to-day, the satisfaction of getting out there and putting everything that you've anticipated over the weeks leading up to it into effect. Being out there, what was that experience like to be on the water with Brian Silvey?
I think one of the things that one has to remember about swinging for steelhead, and I don't want to discourage anyone, but at the same time, we need to be realistic. This is not a high percentage game. This is not a 20 fish day. I caught one fish on this past trip, and I was delighted. You have to have the mindset that I'm going to catch a fish on this cast and this swing, and if I don't, it'll be the next one. And that mindset has to be that way every time you make the cast. So you need to believe, and also you need to believe because it makes a difference. If you have confidence in your fly, you have confidence in your cast and so forth, you're just going to fish it better. And so it makes a difference in whether or not you catch fish. And then the other thing is listen to the guide. There were times when he told me to wait out a little farther when I really didn't want to, but I toughed it out, got my wading staff out, waded out a little farther, and fished that way. And so that was good. So I think that's the one thing that I would mention to people is just you've got to, it's probably the byline of steelheaders. You just got to believe.
How many days were you out there, Greg, until you had your hookup?
This year, I caught my fish on the last day. So, and I hadn't caught a fish the previous year. So I was looking at, my gosh, am I going to go 2 years without a trout or without a steelhead? And started playing some games on me, and I was kind of starting to be a little concerned. And first I want to say too that I don't think any of us would be successful on this trip if it wasn't for Brian Silvey.
Oh, I agree. Yes.
Hawkeye Hawkins and Ryan, our bagger, the boat guy, the camp guy who set everything up for us, made sure we were comfortable, made sure we had food and drinks, and we were warm at night, and weather off of us. The trip wouldn't be successful without those three guys. But getting back to your question on my fish, I even started talking to Brian while we're working through runs. Brian, what do you think of when you're fishing yourself? I was trying to tap into his inner Jedi self, that there's got to be something. And he's like, no, I don't think about any of that. He goes, I'm confident in my fly. I'm confident in your run that you're standing in, because we have caught fish in every single run that you guys fish. And I wouldn't put you in a run if I didn't think that was good water. So I'm confident of the water. I'm confident of the fly. And once I've made a good cast and I've mended at the appropriate point where I need to mend, or if I need to make a second mend, he goes, at that point, I just start enjoying the scenery. I'm looking at sheep up on the hills, deer. I'm looking at the sun coming up. He goes, I forget about everything. And the morning I caught my fish, as I said, it was the very last day. I was about halfway through a 2-hour run. Usually takes about 2 hours to get through a run. And up to that point, I was really worried about everything. And I finally kind of came to an inner peace with myself. I said, if I don't catch a fish on this trip, I'm okay with that. I'm okay. I've had a great time. The people I'm with are wonderful. Brian and his crew couldn't be better. And next thing I know, I feel a tug that is unlike nothing else you ever experience. And, everything in every fiber in your body, you're saying, do not trout set, do not trout set. Pull back, feel that fish, give a couple more back, 2-3 pulls, and now I can lift up. And I see that fish out in the middle of the run, rolling and turning and coming out of the water, and it's like, it's okay. I lost that fish at my feet, pulled maybe a rookie move there, but I was okay with that.
You became the wild animal.
I became the wild animal.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a word or expression, Jonathan, that would summarize everything that took place, the anticipation, the travel, the sleeping under the stars, the standing chest deep in ice cold water in the Deschutes, that would encapsulate the feeling that you had, and tell me about that tug?
Hard to put into one word, but when I think about swinging for steelhead, I always think about hope.
Yeah, it's a game of patience and hope and endurance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a take like the fish take is a take like no other.
Mm-hmm.
And the fish on is like no other. It's probably it's a bit different fight with a spey rod, I think, than with a single hand rod, in some respects, and that I think mostly has to do with the length of the spey rod. But it's an exhilaration. It's starting me make to shake even now. It's just really cool. Yep.
Yeah.
Greg,
the first steelhead ever I caught, I cried. You know,
Wow.
it was
Wow.
that. So for me, it's an inner thing. It's a connection, and I play this game, or I don't know if it's a game, but try to write a story in my head of going back into, let's say, August, when these steelhead are starting to make their run, the summer steelhead. And I think about this even when the plane is departing from DIA.
DIA. Oh, wow.
I'm thinking, if I've been good, if I've built up some good karma throughout the year, and if I'm fortunate enough to catch a fish this year, where is my fish right now? I'm leaving Denver. I'm in a jet. I'm flying towards the Oregon coast. Where is my fish right now? Is it still in the ocean? Is it in the Columbia? Is it waiting for water temperature to feel right to start moving up that river? And I kind of think about that when we two will connect. And I think when that happens, that's a real special moment. Might be kind of weird. There's probably some steelheaders out there that might feel the same way, but that's where it is for me.
It's a small club. It's a small club to be a part of, for sure. To make the travel, to do the time, to go make that connection with that one target species is pretty wild. Years past, this last trip that you guys just got back from, looking forward to the future, what are you going to do different? What are you going to do the same? What are your expectations?
In under 4 minutes.
Boy, what am I going to do different? One thing that comes to mind is I'm going to be a better caster, and I'm going to work more on that. It's really helpful, I think, if your fly is fishing from the moment it lands, and I don't think that was always the case. Not even close to always the case with my cast this year. And here I am, a casting instructor, saying this, but it's true. And I talked to Brian about this, our guide, about this, and he said, nobody makes a perfect cast every time. No, he said,
Except him.
Except him.
Yeah.
Well, but he did say, he said, at one point he said, I don't make a perfect cast every time, which I was, delighted to hear. But so that's one thing I'll do different. Frankly, I will work on my leg strength and balance more, because the wading in the Deschutes, and I suspect in other steelhead rivers, is tricky. There's no doubt about it. I mean, take a wading staff. So I'll probably work on that. And then I think it's real, I'll call it a funk that you got into with being worried about, God, is it really going to be I'll be a little better at, because I had the same thing for part of the trip, and you just need to relax, and I'll be a little better prepared for that. Yeah, and a warmer sleeping bag.
Jonathan and Greg, I appreciate you guys' time today. Sounds like it was a successful trip again out to the Deschutes, and looking forward to doing it all again next year with guide Brian Silvey, floating through the canyon and chasing that fish down.
Absolutely. I'm already planning for next year, and hopefully recruit some old folks and some new
Old
hopefully.
folks.
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate it.
Thanks for having
You
us.
bet. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.